Well, when I started out, I didn't have a contract. You know,
Mhm.
um, I don't think anybody really has a contract when they start out. So let me back up. The business that we're in is called, whether you're in remodeling or construction, most of us are called contractors, right? Or general contractors.
Right.
And everybody starts off at the same place with just like an idea of getting things done. But
Mhm.
I when I got started, I didn't think contractor was a bad word or bad human being or a disgraced company or industry or any of that. I was like, I'm proud to be a contractor. I know
Right.
what I'm going to do. I'm going to live by my rules and I'm going to, do this. And so, but I didn't understand why everybody else hated contractors.
Welcome to the Builder Hacks Podcast, your go-to destination for cutting-edge strategies, time-tested systems, and invaluable insights to revolutionize your construction business and elevate your life. Join your hosts, Nate Piper and Keith Meals, seasoned contractors who are not just in the trenches, but are also pioneering the future of the industry through Concord University. In each episode, we dive deep into the minds of the industry's most accomplished building professionals, uncovering their secrets to success and sharing actionable tips to help you thrive. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out, our goal is to empower you to build a brighter future for yourself and for America. Tune in, level up, and let's build a better tomorrow together. This is the Builder Hacks Podcast. Build your future, building America. And this week, we wanted to get into a topic that for every contractor, every trade professional, so is a huge piece of what you've got going on, whether you realize it or not. And sometimes you don't realize it until you're in the middle of a challenge and then you're like, I wish I would have. And that's really what we want to kind of get into today. So this is going to be something that's for a new contractor, or if you're an experienced contractor, there's going to be some pieces in this that you're going to take away, want to add to what you're doing. So you definitely want to make sure you pay attention on this one. So we're going to be talking the most important thing to setting structure in any kind of project you're doing, the contract. So Nate, so whenever you got started out, what did you start out with as a contract? Did you have the same contract you've got now, or was it markedly different?
Oh, it was extremely different.
How so?
Well, when I started out, I didn't have a contract. You know,
Mhm.
um, I don't think anybody really has a contract when they start out. So let me back up. The business that we're in is called, whether you're in remodeling or construction, most of us are called contractors, right? Or general contractors.
Right.
And everybody starts off at the same place with just like an idea of getting things done. But,
Mhm.
I when I got started, I didn't think contractor was a bad word or bad human being or a disgraced company or industry or any of that. I was like, I'm proud to be a contractor. I know
Right.
what I'm going to do. I'm going to live by my rules and I'm going to, do this. And so, but I didn't understand why everybody else hated contractors until a few years in, and that's another story. We'll get to that. So, but when I got started, I didn't I didn't have a contract. I had a handshake and I had my
Mhm.
word. And
Right.
I knew that's what I was going to stand by. And everybody else stands by that
Right.
until your word and their ears say something different. And then in that moment, you got a problem because either you're going to spend too much money or they're going to not be happy with things.
Right.
And that's where problems kind of live because you're not being clear about it. So
And
that's kind of
I
where I
think that's
started.
one of the biggest keys right there, Nate, that you're talking about. So is that, what you say and what the homeowner hears so often. And you'd be surprised at how different that can be. And it's like, because there's been so many times where I've come back and I'm like, and a lot of times I'll have, either a designer with me, my cabinet person, my project coordinator. So one of my other project managers might happen to be around whenever we're doing this. And they come back, the homeowner comes back later on and says, oh no, this is what we talked about. I'm literally like, it's like a Scooby Doo movement, huh? So, because you really
First time
don't
I
know.
ever
I'm
heard
like,
that.
where did that come from? And it's like, I know that wasn't what I, and there's certain things, I'm sure you're the same way, Nate. There's certain conversations that you have with every homeowner and certain processes you've got that you only do it one way.
Yeah.
And you're shocked whenever they bring up something else and it's like, there's no way that would have ever come out of my mouth. So,
Yeah.
and that's where the challenge comes in when you don't have that contract, because there's nothing to go back to that says this is what's going to happen. And that's what it gets. That's what's gotten so many contractors, I mean, including myself, and I know probably
Oh
you too,
yeah.
Nate.
Yeah,
So got us all in
absolutely.
trouble at some point because that communication is not clear. So, and understood. And I think that's the main thing, understood among all
Yeah.
parties.
Well, the hard part is vocabulary, right? Because when we're talking, we're speaking in a language that we understand, or we're thinking everybody else understands the exact same language.
We
But what
speak
ends
in
up
constructionese. Yes.
yeah, I'm speaking constructionese from Taiwan or something. It's like this weird thing, and I'm like, we say drywall, somebody says wall board, somebody else says oh, the plaster on the wall, right?
Mhm.
They all mean something different, and we're
Yep.
talking in different languages, and it makes it really hard. And then this happens on every project too. Whoever's getting the work done then goes and recruits their family and friends to have an input, and then that input then says, oh, well, that guy's doing it wrong, and this happened over here, and this is what you need to do, and this and this and this and this, and then everybody's involved in the
Yeah.
conversation. So
It's
vocabulary is wrong, and then you have outside input, and
Well,
so those two
and
things.
the outside input that you're talking about, Nate, unfortunately, and this is like anytime someone tells me that they've got a friend coming over to look at it,
Oh yeah.
I immediately start asking questions about the friend's experience because if this is someone who's in the industry, they may have enough knowledge to be able to go ahead and give an opinion that actually carries weight. So the challenge is like you were talking about, Nate. They bring the neighbor in, they bring their family member, so who had a renovation but knows nothing about the industry at all. So
Yeah.
you've got the person who has no experience going ahead and guiding the person who this may be their first renovation they're going through. So you have two people that don't know enough about it to truly have an informed opinion. That's nothing against homeowners. You don't know what you
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, hey, whenever I go to the doctor, I don't know what the doctor knows whenever you're going ahead and looking at what I'm looking at. So I've got to take them as the expert. So it's the same way whenever you're in construction. Unfortunately, too many homeowners feel that because they live in a house, they know what it's supposed to be and how it's supposed to go together and what the process is and everything about the industry. And that happens frequently.
Well, it's one of those things that's like the outside information, when people are making decisions, it's important for them to recruit other people to be able to help them in these decisions, because
Right.
doing a project, you're making a lot of choices and
Mm-hmm.
decisions.
A lot.
What I've kind of come back to realize, and this is much later on in many projects and many many mess ups that had to be corrected. Whenever I hear that they're getting somebody else's opinion, be like, let's all have a meeting and I'll be there. What time
Yeah.
is that meeting? I'm going to have to readjust my schedule,
Right.
because you get to a point where you're not involved in the conversation, and they're
Mhm.
saying things that don't line up, and you have a reason or a process that you're going through, but
Right.
you never get to explain that piece because somebody else has a different opinion about a different project, about a different thing.
Mhm.
And the one thing I found out is that it doesn't matter if I've done the same bathroom with the same layout, with the same, materials. There's always going to be something that's wrong or different with each one, and I have to make adjustments. No
Mhm.
project's the same.
Nope. Not
And
at all.
so it took me many years to figure out, oh, hey, number one, I need a contract. B, number two, I need one that's beneficial for both of us,
Mhm.
and longer than one paragraph. And so that was
Hold
the
on.
beginning of
Hold
my
on.
journey.
You mean the one-page contract doesn't work, Nate? Whenever you're doing a renovation on a home?
I had a buddy of mine who had a one-page contract. It's got everything in it, everything. And I was like, yeah, let me see it. And the front page was like nice big print, and it, outlined like two items. And
Right.
you flip it over on the back, and then you got to get a magnifying glass because it's so fine printed, and they fit every word. They skip punctuation. That's like, well, that's not fair,
No. It's
Um,
those those are the types of things, and that's where like whenever I started out, like Nate said he didn't have a contract. I actually had a contract, but it was only about a page, maybe two, depending on what all was going on the job. So, and it's one of the pieces that definitely you learn over time. It's like I always just look at people's stuff and I'm like, you have like a 12-page contract. Why is it 12 pages long? That's
yeah,
crazy. So you can
yeah,
go ahead and lay out the project and in a few paragraphs in a lot of cases, sometimes a little bit more depending on the size of the project. So, but I'm like, it doesn't need to be that long. And then
yeah,
you get into it in that whole part that we're talking about for communication. One of the feedback that we get now, though, is how detailed we are and what we actually put in our contracts. Like I
yeah,
line them out every phase, what's going to be done in that phase, what the expectations are. Literally, it's all in there. And that's one of the reasons why our contracts have gotten the length they are. And it's also one of the reasons why my homeowners are happier overall, because everything's been explained. They know what to expect. They know where there's questions. They know where there's allowances. So in the contract, if they're for finishes
Yep.
like, flooring or for tile in the bathrooms and stuff like that, cabinets, they've got an allowance, and it's spelled out up front. It's not the mystery. So
Yeah.
oh, well, what's Keith making, and are we gonna have to get upcharged on this? Hey, if this is what we spend, so this is what I've got in here. If you go above it, you pay extra. If not, I go ahead and refund you the rest of it. But that comes with time, and the more you convey to your homeowners, so definitely the better the result is going to be in their minds. And
Mhm.
that's where the key is. I mean, you may deliver the same exact thing, whether you've got that contract written out specifically, or whether you just go ahead and whether you go ahead and actually just do a one-page contract. You know what you're doing. And that's the challenges when we, as contractors or as anyone in any industry, does what they do. So you know exactly what the process is, or you should, but or you shouldn't be doing it. And that's the key. But if you know what it is, they don't know what it is, and they're
Yeah.
operating. Think of those times where you go into something like I always think of for me when I go to get my car worked on. It's like
Mhm.
I've got this much knowledge about cars. So, and unfortunately, it's enough to make me dangerous, but not enough to go ahead and typically help me out whenever there's a challenge in the situation.
Yeah.
And whenever I go in there, there's so many times where I feel like, and if you've ever experienced this before, I feel like I'm getting taken advantage of at times because of the fact that it's like I don't know what I don't know.
Exactly.
And that's what homeowners feel with us a lot of times is they don't know what they don't know.
Well, and part of this too is that we probably need to do a podcast on this is like, how do you choose the right contract, right? Or the right,
Mm-hmm.
company to come in and do the service
What
or
do
the work that's needed.
Nate, I've
Yeah.
got a free download PDF on that. So
Oh,
for all of my
good.
homeowners when they come to my website.
Well, it's like that should be a podcast that we should give out to everybody. But I mean, that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
where the thing kind of starts, right? It's like most of the time when someone young is getting started in the business and they're taking on a piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
A few podcasts ago, we talked about, some young men, one of them wanted to come in and do a grill cleaning business,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't have this conversation with him. I wish I did. And I probably will call him after this podcast and set up a meeting with him to kind of walk him through that. But um, what is his contract going to look like and how does he get it? Because he's cold calling these people. These aren't people that he knows, right? These are people that he doesn't know, and he needs to set some parameters around his services, and he needs to be
Mm-hmm.
able to be clear about how he's going to clean things and where is he going to do the cleaning. Because what his contract should line out is like he needs a place where someplace on their property where he can actually clean the grill. Because if
Right.
that's not specified, then he might just be cleaning it on the patio, and all the charcoal and all the grease and all the stuff is going
Mm-hmm.
to land on the concrete, and then
Yep.
that's going to cause a bigger hassle.
Or
Or
even
it could,
worse on pavers if they have pavers.
or pavers, or
Yeah.
even on their grass or their
Yep.
shrubs or their plants or windows. I mean, so having that in a contract and being able to be upfront was like, okay, you need to designate a space for me to be able to clean your grill on your property.
Right.
Needs to be a part of the contract. But I'm sure him, like most of them, are going to start off with people that they know, friends and family,
Right.
handshake deals. We'll
Mm-hmm.
do it for $100,
Right.
and they get in. And for the most part, that's an okay place to start because you're getting in and you have to make some money. But then
Mm-hmm.
you have to transition over pretty quickly. And starting out, you don't need a 12 or 13-page contract.
No.
You need you need a document that outlines what you're doing,
Right.
for how much, and how long it's going to take.
Mm-hmm.
And you write that out. You can go and find a million places to get a downloaded copy of a generic contract to start there, but you have to start somewhere. And then as you start to make money and your projects get bigger, you hire an attorney. You don't go to your family or in-laws or
Unless they
guy down the
are an attorney,
street,
unless they are a business attorney.
and then you
That,
hire them. And I tell you, pay your attorneys, even
yep.
if they're family, you
Even if
still
they're
pay them.
family.
You know,
Exactly.
even if you give them $5, give them $5. But you want to get an attorney to draft up what you're doing, and you want to have it lined out so it makes sense for you. I got to a point where I didn't have one. It was all handshake deals. Then I moved it into a 1-pager, and then a 3-pager, and then an 8-pager, and now we have
Why
a
do it keep getting
13
longer, Nate?
Well, you keep learning lessons along the way of what's been missed in the other one. But, I've also got mine set up. So we use 3 different types of contracts. And it's really based upon my liability, right? What is my exposure in each piece? And so if we're doing a project and it's less than $5,000, we're still using a 1-pager for that because my
Right.
liability in that piece is pretty low and pretty limited. And, I've just gotten to a point where it's like, okay, let's cover the basics. Let's make sure that everybody knows what's going on for this piece. A
Mhm.
$5,000 contract, we're in and out probably 2 to 3 days at max, and we're moving on down the road. Now, our remodel projects, our big ones, we've got a 13-page contract, kind of like how Keith does, and it goes through everything. Like,
Mhm.
where are bathrooms going to be set up? Are we going
Yep.
to bring in porta potties? Are we going to have power? Are we going to, like, you go through all the things that you're not thinking of in the beginning. You start learning these lessons as you go on,
Yeah.
and you
And like you
realize
and
that
like you were talking about things like for me, one of the big things I look at when you're doing remodels and stuff like that, where are we storing our materials at? Like
exactly.
what area we have to have a designated area because and here's one of the challenges if you don't do that, and this had hit me before. So it's like, all right, well, they cleaned out their house and put everything in their garage. All right, where am I putting everything at now whenever I bring it into the house? So
Yeah.
I specifically state, and not just in the contract, we go over it before they start moving everything around to make sure that, all right, is this spot going to work for you? Or are you planning on putting things in here? And if that's the case, where is our spot that we're able to bring? And I typically tell them I need a room. I need
Yeah.
something that's typically going to be, I'd say 10 by 12, 12 by 12 or bigger. So to
Mhm.
be able to house this, because we're going to have different phases of material coming in, and sometimes those phases overlap, and you
Yeah.
need to have space to be able to handle it all.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the contract's supposed to do. It's supposed to
Mhm.
outline everything. And I always find it funny that how many guys just want to just have something and throw it in front of them, and they never read them, and they don't know what's in it. They don't
Yeah.
know. It's one of the things that when we start onboarding people, one of the first things we do in the first week is we bring out our contracts and then we let them read them, and we don't tell them what's in it. We just say, okay, what are your questions? What did
Right.
what did you miss? What is this? Because what we want is that we want them to be able to fully digest the information and the severity,
Hmm.
so that when they're getting questions on these contracts, they know exactly what's in them. But
Right.
it's just the standard operating of like, how do we do business?
And for
I,
us, I mean, like a lot of things that we go ahead and include in there too. So we've got a percentage that we do for our standard. Everything we do is cost plus. So for my
Mhm.
company, and there's a standard percentage that we go ahead and put in on the plus side of it. So and there's another clause in our contracts that if they make a change during the process, there's 2 things that are in there for us, and we put them in over time for reasons, which of course anything else. So
Mhm.
we put in there is a change order fee, which means if they want us to price something out, so they pay us $250 just for pricing it out. If they accept the change order, then that 250 gets applied to the price of the change order. So I mean,
Mhm.
but what it's made up for is we had homeowners that used to run us ragged. Hey, can you price this out? Hey, can you price this out? Hey, can you all of a sudden you've priced out 14 different changes in their home and they didn't accept any of them. All it does
Exactly.
is burn my time. It burns my subcontractor's time for getting the pricing out of them. It burns my office people's time, my project coordinator's time to go ahead and put all this stuff together and get it back out the door. So you've got to go ahead and put the brakes on. Now there are times, and I'll tell people this: you can have it in your contract with that fee. I don't necessarily charge it. If they ask every once in a while for that, I don't worry about it. It's the ones who start rapid firing me with changes. That's whenever
Mhm.
that piece gets brought up. So, and I usually bring it up on the first one, and I'll do it on the first one just so they've seen it happen.
Sure.
So, but if they
You have
don't
to.
do it frequently, then I don't worry about it.
Well, and it's kind of one of those things. It's like this is setting the stage or the rules or the parameters or the field in which you guys are going to
Right.
operate in, and it makes it so the communications on the front end, you can give leniency. You don't have to pull out the
Right.
flag on every foul.
Hmm.
But if things start tipping in one direction or the other, there's some guide rails there.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the important part of having a contract is that without the guide rails, you're really left up to the he say, she say, they say world. And then you know, I've been in numerous legal situations based around this stuff. And I think it's because I have been in those legal situations that I've kind of gotten to understand more.
So what
And
happens in the legal situation when you're referring to that, Nate?
well, I've been in on both sides. I've been on the plaintiff side. I've been on the defendant side. I've actually
Mm-hmm.
been witnesses and expert witnesses for a bunch of
Right.
things. And it's the clarity that you have to have inside the contract, because if you end up in a courtroom situation, the only person that wins, well, there's two, the lawyers or the expert witness. That's it.
Yeah. The lawyer always wins. That's a given.
But he wins the biggest.
Yeah.
I was saying, as an expert witness, I've won some pretty big settlements myself for my
Right.
time to sit there and wait for them to argue. But they wouldn't be arguing as much if you've already written out and thought about your process all the way through. And I think that's the big takeaway. It's like, you really don't know what you don't know in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So as you
Oh, and I
grow,
I had one more thing to add in that for that change order piece before we get past that, and I totally
yeah,
forget about it because I know how my mind is. So for that change order piece, outside of having a change order fee on the front end, so our percentage that we charge on change orders is higher. So it's
mhm.
actually about double what our normal percentage is. So if you did it in the front end of the piece, because and people are like, well, that's crazy. And I used to think the same thing. I used to work with people and their change order percentages or change order amounts were a lot higher. And I'm like, why is it so much higher? The thing that you don't think about, and this, especially if you're starting out. So, and some of you have been in the industry, this may be a big light bulb that goes off for you. Whenever you go ahead and do this, when you do a change order in the process, number one, it's going to slow down because typically they're asking right as you're getting ready to do a phase, which means either you've got to pause the phase, so long enough to get them pricing and then them to sign off on it, which, as all of us know, once you've got a flow going on a project, the train keeps moving really well until you slam the brakes on. And then it takes, just like any train, it takes a lot of energy to go ahead and get that train moving forward again. What you're going to lose is a boatload of time, energy, and momentum. So is what I actually look at it as. And that's part of what's in there too. And then there's times where they may take too long to decide, and I wasn't able to hold off what I was doing. And now we're going to have to backtrack and do some additional work that's going to cost a little bit more. So I can either go ahead and absorb that little bit of extra, figuring that's going to happen. So we go ahead and add on to that change order, which is what you should do if you know it's going to take them a long time. So, but having that extra in there, the other part it catches is mistakes. Because anytime you change the process, like we've got a color sheets that go out to our job sites. So whenever we start our projects, well, every time there's a change order, we've got to make changes to the color sheets, which means somebody in the process may not get the information correctly. It's out there for them to refer to on the job site, but if they miss it and they do something wrong, and then the homeowner already signed off on a change order about it, then I've got to go ahead and pay to have it done right again. So is what it comes down to. And that's part of the reason why you go ahead and put that extra in there, because there are times where we've had to go ahead and pay to have it done essentially a second time because it wasn't done right the first time because of a change order. So you just risk more mistakes is what happens.
Yeah, I think your change order process is an extremely good one. But this comes with like refining your contract, your way of doing things, so that you're being more efficient and you're not losing more profit. And I think that's the whole goal too.
Yeah.
Is like it works as a protection. It works as like a guideline. It works as guardrails. I mean, there's a lot of things that are good about contracts. I think a lot of people are scared of contracts too, um, just because either
Mhm.
there's too many words, or
Yeah. Or they don't
they're not
understand the words because it's
right
written. If, like you say, if you've got the attorney write it, it's written in legalese. That's what it
legally.
comes down to. And if you do that, if you don't understand it and they give you the contract back, make them explain what it means. I've
Yeah.
literally had my guys go back and rewrite stuff. I said,
Mhm.
make it so that an average 8-year-old can understand what the hell you wrote. I know why you write this stuff. So
Yeah.
it's because then we have to come back to you and we've got to go ahead and do anything because no one understands what the hell it actually meant. The
Yeah.
challenge is if my homeowners don't understand it and I don't understand it and I'm unable to explain it to them, well, how is that helping me out in any way, shape, or form? Or my homeowner out in any way, shape?
It doesn't.
Mhm.
It just makes it more confusing and gives
Yeah.
a bigger standpoint. That's why I like to pay attorneys regardless. I don't want to take somebody's free
Yeah.
contract. I've given away contracts. I've given away my contract,
Yeah.
and that's fine. But everybody needs to understand and read their own and line it up. I didn't like reading. I wasn't a big reader in high school and
Mhm.
through college. That wasn't my forte. But I got into business and I started reading contracts and contract negotiations and bids and things of that nature. And I fell in love with reading that kind of stuff because then it started to make sense and put it
Right.
into perspective.
There's a purpose behind it. So.
Well, especially after you get you come up negative on a few jobs and you wonder why, and then you're like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, I should have done this. Oh yeah, I should put this in. Oh yeah, this is what needs to go there. Um, but I think everybody has to go through that process, right? And that's what helps you kind of refine and kind of get better at doing the job. Um, we've added in quite a few things. One of them is no slandering, so
Mm-hmm.
we've had some people that we did a great job for them. They loved it, but for whatever reason, they didn't like one of our project managers, so they went on social media and just ripped our
Yep.
project manager for no reason, even though they loved the project. They just
Yeah.
didn't connect with this one guy. I was like, okay,
Hmm.
well, that's
That
a lesson
happens.
learned. Let's put
Yeah.
that in the contract.
And that's the reason why contracts get as long as they are, because you have that happen. Like I've added in recently on mine. I typically I do big stuff on social media. I have all kinds of
Yeah,
stuff going on social media. I do videos, pictures, everything that goes up all the time. I record stuff for my website for finished results and things like that. So, and you always want to have that ability to be able to do that. And I had a homeowner the one time who came back at me and she's like, "Oh, I can't have you go ahead and record any of this stuff. You didn't ask me about doing that. You didn't have permission to go ahead and do any of that." Well, now there's a photo release in the middle of my contract
yeah,
so that they get to go ahead and sign off on, also allowing us to go ahead and take pictures, shoot videos. So acknowledge the fact that we are going to have it out there. We are allowed to use it for marketing purposes. So this is their express written consent.
yeah. Another good one.
Hmm.
We got that one in.
Yeah.
There's just all kinds of things that you can put into it. Um,
I know, like for us, because we do so many kitchens and bathrooms and things like that. And I know you guys use 2020, don't you, for your
yeah,
cabinet stuff? So that's one of the things like we actually when we have send the contract over, we have attachments to the contract when we send it over that are referenced in the contract. So because they are part of the building documents essentially for us, and we'll send over the 2020 documents. So and for anyone who's
yeah,
wondering, 2020 is a software so that a lot of the cabinet designers go ahead and use, and even regular designers go ahead and use for other things. So it's a CAD type of software is what it is essentially. But anyways, with that piece, we send those extra drawings over even when we have blueprints because that goes ahead and specs out exactly what it's going to be in those spaces specifically.
mhm,
And I want them, I added, there's nothing on 2020 stuff that actually adds initials, but I have them initial off on every page
yeah.
of those. And like with
So
my
they
contract,
understand.
that's actually a key piece. A lot of people will do a contract. The only place they have a signature is on the last page. So, and there's nothing on any of the other pages acknowledging. So the
Yeah,
fact this is what I got from whenever I got my
yeah,
first mortgage. It's like, why do I have to initial off on every freaking one of these pages? And it's
yeah,
because, well, if you initialed off on it, we know you at least saw it. Whether you read it or not, that's on you. But you had the chance to read it, is what it comes down to. And it's the same thing on my contracts. So you
yeah,
have to, my homeowners have to initial off on every page of the contract, and so do we. We actually initial
yeah,
off too. On the main contract, on the attachments and stuff like that, it's just them initialing or signing off one way or the other. But we do that with cabinet designs. We do that with our color sheets. So we do that. We have what I call my main contract is all the legalese stuff. So the stuff the attorneys write, and it's like it's the stuff that everyone goes to sleep, and very few people unfortunately read it, which is to their detriment. That's one thing I'll tell you as a contractor. If
yeah,
you're ever handed a contract, you cannot just assume it. Unfortunately, in today's world where like you go ahead and download an app and they send you this big long legal disclosure that you've got to go ahead and read and sign off on before you can accept the app, before you can get the app, people have become accustomed to not reading anything. It's the
anything.
biggest mistake that you'll
Yeah,
ever make. And those are the things that'll catch you in the future because once you sign off, it's acknowledging that you've looked at it. But that's one of the reasons why we have that on there is that's an acknowledgement. You should read everything in there, and I hate it. Like
yeah,
I remember the first time, Nate, that I got when I got my first insurance quote for general liability insurance, and I'd asked for a couple of very specific things in it. And
yeah,
I got the boilerplate template. Here's your GL for your business. And I actually read through it and I'm like, you didn't include anything that I asked for. There's
yeah,
nothing in here that stipulates that or says that. And there's actually a couple clauses that go directly against what I asked you for. So it's like if I didn't read that and catch that, then if something happened, then I'm left butt hanging out in the wind,
yeah.
liable like there's no tomorrow. And that's the challenge that most people don't realize is you got to read those contracts.
Well, you got to pay attention to them, and you got to be familiar with them. And no one's going to start off at a high level of understanding
No.
contracts. But the whole
Mm-mm.
point of this is like get in, get started. I'm the same way with you. Like I get into, whether I'm at a closing for a real estate transaction
Mm-mm.
or um I've got a client and I'm having to sign, I'm coming in as a sub for them as a
Right.
GC, or they're coming in as a sub for me as a GC. A lot of these things are written, and you have to pay attention to what's in them and why they're there, and then make objections if you don't like
Mhm.
what you're
Right.
reading, or it's not going to be beneficial for you.
Mhm.
Because if not, like you're saying, Keith, you sign off on it, it's an acknowledgement that you did it. And I hate it because I do kind of the same thing on apps and things. I'm like, get this thing out of the way.
Yep.
I'm swiping up, and then
Yep.
yes, I approve.
Get to your checkbox. That's all I want. Get me my
Yeah.
checkbox.
And so, it's funny. I was at a closing. What was this, back in July, and the lady. So I close with the same mortgage broker all the time, and she knows to get me documents 3 days before I'm coming to the closing table, and because on previous transactions way back in the beginning, she just brought everything on day of signing. I said, well,
It's
I
going to be
have
a
to read
long
all this
signing.
through,
Yeah.
and it's a book, right? I'm 3 hours in there reading every page, and she keeps
Mhm.
coming in like, "Are you done yet? I got another closing." Oh, well, you gave me these documents. I got to read them.
You
She's
gave me
like,
10 minutes notice. Sorry about your
"Yeah."
luck. Maybe you'll do different next time. So,
I was like, "You got to send this to me 3 days before, or I'm not going to get through it." Anyways, um, but it was important because there was a few things in there I had questions about,
yeah.
and so was able. I didn't have an option to like not accept it, but I had an option to read it and then to make a decision. Do I still want this piece of property
Right.
or not?
Mhm.
And does the risk versus the reward benefit weigh out? And can I make an
Mhm.
informed decision? Not a decision that was made for me with no clause, right?
Mhm.
But just can I make an informed decision based on the information that's in the contract? And that's where you
So,
have to get to.
whenever, like, if you have a homeowner that you're working with and you're getting ready to do a contract, Nate, so,
Yeah,
and you send them the contract and they come back with, I want you to change X, I want you to change Y, I want you to change Z, one, two, three.
I
So
get that sometimes.
what do you do when that happens?
Well, typically I only get that if it's an attorney or somebody that's net worth is above $25 million, right?
Right.
And most of it's because they want everything to lean their direction. What I end up doing is I say, okay, you need to sit down and explain to me why this needs to change, right?
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, they don't really have a good explanation. They just want to be difficult in that scenario, right? And so,
They're looking to exert what they feel is their power in the negotiation
yeah.
process is what it comes
And
down to.
so,
Right.
and I combat that with one or two ways. Either one, I walk away from the project and just say, you're not a good fit. This isn't going to
Mhm.
work. I don't want to be into any kind of misunderstanding or argument with you in the future, but good luck to you and in your project. I hope you do well. Or I switch up the contract and give in. I say, look, I will change this, but in order to change this, I have to have some insurances myself, which means that the project's going to go up in price. So therefore, I need to be able to increase what my bid is in order to offset the in case this happens thing, right? Because
Right.
now I'm doing, and I charge a pretty hefty fee for that, right?
Mhm.
So just to change our contract is $25,000. I don't even care if I've got to change a comma, a period, what have you. And it's not because I'm trying to be rude. I just know I got to go back to my attorney,
Mhm.
and he's going to charge a bunch of money, and he's going to be aggravated that he has to rewrite the contract that he's already written. So that solves one portion of it, but then I'm being inconvenienced because now I have to go back and talk to my attorney to have him change it. So the $25,000 flat fee is just a flat fee. Now, I'll say that over the last, 2 decades, that has only happened three, I think maybe four times, because we come to an understanding of like what I have in the contract is very, kind of specific to our process and things that we need.
Right.
And it's a fair and legitimate kind of way to handle
Mhm.
business. Um, but when you write a contract, that's the leverage that you get. You're not
Right.
coming in there. You're coming in there as like, this is me and our process, and this is how we do business. So
And that's always one of the big things. Like, I'll have homeowners, and you're right, very few people actually do it. Oh, and it literally for me, whenever they start going ahead and negotiating the contract, it's at least we'll call it a yellow flag. I won't call it a red flag, but we'll call it a
Yeah.
yellow flag. It's a pay attention. So,
Hmm.
because if we're already having this happen before we get into the project,
Yeah.
so, and a lot of times it'll be something, and I ask those same questions like you do. So, all right, what are you concerned about with this change you're asking me to make? So, what's
Hmm.
the actual concern behind it?
Yeah.
So, and find out what that piece is, because that a lot of times you can go ahead and find that out from them, and it's something. All right, well, we really don't need to change the contract. Maybe you didn't understand what this is written or how it's written. So,
Exactly.
and let me explain that to you. Or if we need to, I can just add a little addendum piece on that to goes ahead and assuages whatever their fear, their concern is. So in that piece. And I've done that before, but yeah, whenever they start going ahead and writing wholesale changes, I'm like, hey, I get it. You want it to be written your way.
Yeah.
So this is written to go ahead and protect both of us as effectively as it possibly can. So
Yeah.
in this instance, and that's why we've got all these different pieces. I mean, I've had homeowners that one of the famous ones that comes to me for contracts. So is since I work almost exclusively in residential. I've done a few commercial things here and there, but I just prefer the residential market. And by going ahead and doing residential, you'll have the occasional homeowner that comes to you and wants to go ahead and put in a hard deadline on when you're going to finish. Basically, hey, this is your completion date. So for your project. And that's something that if you do commercial work, that's typical. That's a part of the
Yeah.
contract, and most
Yeah.
of them, or at least if someone who's writing it knows what's going on. So, but whenever you go ahead and do that on the residential side, that's a little different. And whenever
Mhm.
they go ahead and ask that, it's like, all right, I'll go ahead and put that completion date in there, but I give them a caveat. So I'm going to give them if we're going to go ahead and do a completion date for every, and then they're looking for when they have a completion date, they're looking for a penalty. Again, very much commercial contract
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
So for every day you run past that completion date. So the caveat that I throw in is great. So if we're going to do that, we're going to do the bonus system the same way the commercial guys do too. And for every day I come in earlier, this is how much money I get paid extra for coming
Yep.
in early.
Yep.
So and realize, so
And
here's the,
time delay deductions too.
yes. So and that's it for anything that's their choices. My change orders, when we were talking about that earlier, my change orders say the number of days this adds on to the expected completion time of the project.
Yeah.
Always,
Yeah.
whether I've got this completion date piece in my contract or not, that's setting expectations of what's going to happen. But anytime they make changes, I encourage changes whenever I've got a completion date in there because
Oh
they
yeah.
just keep bumping that time frame further and further out is what ends up happening. But that's like you go ahead and do those kinds of things. I've had people who are like, "Oh, we don't want to do that." Then I'm like, "All right, so this is you're looking to penalize me, but there's no incentive for me to go ahead and actually do what you're looking for me to do is get done faster, right?" So
Yeah.
this only works for you, and the contract's supposed to work for both of us and make both of us happy. As soon as you go ahead and call somebody out on that, typically they go ahead and back down because now they realize that they're being the one who's over the top. So putting it nicely, as opposed to looking for something that's equitable for everybody.
Yeah. One of the things that I get a lot of, it's kind of funny, subcontractors that come in and we pick them up from time to time to do different projects. But
Mhm.
I get subcontractors in my contract. They always like to scratch things out and write in their own language and do all this stuff.
Right.
And I have to keep coming back to them and be like, look, nope, that is not going to work. I can't give
Mhm.
you a check until you sign my contract. And they're
Right.
like, well, this doesn't work for me and blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, you have to understand, I have a contract with my customer, right?
Mhm.
And inside that contract, there are these things, right?
Mhm.
All of the outlines of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it.
Right.
And then I got to turn around. I have to have a contract with you, my subcontractor. You work for
Mhm.
me, who's working for them, right? So
Right.
our contracts have to come together in alignment. And if you're putting in your specific rules, then how is that going to work out when something goes wrong between me and you in that situation? And I
Mhm.
got the homeowner or the customer in this situation.
Yep.
So no, I cannot change your your piece. And if you want to work for me and you want to get paid, then you've got to be in alignment with our contract,
But
with
that
insurance
piece
company.
right there that Nate just brought up is something I know so many builders who don't do. And
Yeah.
I've got guys that come out for some of my subcontractors. I'll get a text. This is what the price on this project's going to be. Now, the
Hmm.
big difference between us is we've also worked together for, a decade and a half. So
Yeah.
all those other parameters that Nate's talking about in those, what they are subcontractor agreements is what Nate's referring to. So if you've never heard of that, if you're doing general contracting, you need to have those because there's so many different pieces in that, whether it's draw schedules, expectations of work. So insurance that they've got to go ahead and
Yeah.
provide. So all the different pieces that come in that, like draw schedules is one of the big ones. I know when I first
Yeah.
started out, I would get caught in that all the time because certain phases like cabinets and counter cabinets, I'd have to do a 50% deposit on cabinets when you order them.
Yeah.
And then for countertops, it's you've got to pay for the material itself. So with one of mine, one of the other ones, it's 50%. So either way, though, so you've got to go ahead and pay for something up front. And in the beginning, I didn't know that. So my draw schedule, and this is like what you were talking about, Nate, my draw schedule wasn't set up with that money already coming in from the homeowner, which meant that I was fronting that money. So out of
Mhm.
my side, to be able to do that, to be able to move it forward, and that came exactly like Nate said. You've got to get both contracts working together, so
Yeah.
which basically means they've got to go ahead and conform more to yours. So, or you have to know what theirs says and adjust yours. Like for me, I adjust some of the draws, so to go ahead and bring in some of that money a little bit earlier. That way, my deposits are there when they need to be there.
Yeah, and I've been able to do some of that, right? I've made more adjustments with subcontractors in my official contract than I
Mhm.
have than for the customer.
Right.
Because what I've come to find out is like, you know, you know what? That guy's got a good point of why he needs to get paid when he needs to get paid, right?
Right.
And that guy has a good point of like why he needs to have a location on the property to either put a portage on or to put
Right.
this. So I started incorporating, their request into my official contract that then
Right.
I then give over. And a lot of people don't do that. They kind of work, you know, these are my rules, these are only my rules, and I'm not going
Mhm.
to work with either party. Well, you're kind of limiting your
Yeah.
customer base and your labor base by doing that. And I know a
Mhm.
bunch of like big home building companies that are like, this
Mhm.
is our way, this is the only way. If you don't comply, then it's like, and their contracts are
I
like,
used to work for some of those companies.
yeah,
Yeah.
their contracts are like 50 and 60 pages
Yep.
long. And, it gets to be to a point where it's like nobody really understands what's going on. They just have an idea. And
Mhm.
that's what I told that same home builder that you're familiar with. That's like
Uh-huh.
your contract's so big. Who other than like a handful of us has actually read
Ever
it?
read it.
And
Yep.
nobody on that's out there that works for you who's managing job sites has ever read
Yeah.
your
Your own
handbook, let
team
alone
hasn't read this. They don't know what they're supposed to be enforcing or how this is
they
laid
have
out.
no idea,
Right.
none. And it's like it's so laughable sometimes. But
But that's and it's working with people, and that's one of the big things is that you want to work with them as much as you can. That's not going to go ahead and put you out. And like one of the reasons,
yeah,
like Nate was talking about earlier with homeowners and things like that, we don't like making changes to the contract because again, it changes our process, and
mhm,
now our team has to be aware that something's different.
yeah,
And if you've got something different in every project and you're running 15 to 20 projects at a time, guess what? It's hard to keep track of all the differences. And that's one of the reasons, like the big home builders, I get it. So when you're going ahead and building 1,000 homes a year in a specific area, you know what? It's
yeah,
got to all be the same. It
yeah,
can't be different all over the place because there's no way it's an unmanageable process at that point, is what it comes down to.
yeah. It's just too much.
Yeah. And
But
that's
kind of
so good.
go ahead.
You're up, Nate. Good.
No, no, I'm good.
No, so but whenever it comes down to it, I mean, the contract for me, like one of the other big things that we do, so with our contract, so I told you I get real specific with everything as far as all my phases go, and that's one of the attachments that we go ahead and include. We actually call it attachment A, so is what
Mhm.
it's called. And whenever we go through, that's literally line itemed out with everything. So drywall, we're gonna go ahead and hang, finish, spray. So we're gonna be back for a bump at some point in the process. Like literally everything for that phase gets lined out in there. If we're doing a remodel, it lines out the areas. We're going to be in the kitchen, we're going to be in the master bathroom, so we're going to be in bedroom number 3. So because those are the areas that we're doing things. Like I line all of that stuff out. If we've got, paint colors and things like that, and I know that shows up in Schedule A also, but it's also on the color sheets, and they have to sign off on the color sheets too if those things are decided whenever we go to contract. A lot of times the design things we don't get into, or at least the color selections we don't get into until after the contract signed, because I don't like burning my team's time for something that I don't know is happening yet.
Yeah,
Oh, is what it comes down to. So but those every one of those additional pieces just makes that clearer and clearer and clearer in your contract, what you're delivering, and your homeowner is actually happy about it because then they know. There's been times where I'm like, hey, if you go back and refer to this, they're like, oh yeah, that's right. Well, if you've got it written like that and they saw it, it's like, all right, I did see that somewhere. I just didn't remember it.
Yeah, I don't think most homeowners, um, I think actually commercial GCs are probably the worst at this, right? Because they're trying to nickel out everything. But we'll keep it within homeowner compliance. But most homeowners aren't looking to get over on a contractor doing work, right? Most of them are pretty happy and appreciative that somebody's there at their home and is
Mhm.
doing improvements and
Right.
doing the best that they can to show up and all these things. And so they're not looking to take advantage or to make things more difficult. They're just wanting it to be done and completed in a timely manner, um, to the best that looks appropriate. And half the time they don't even know what it's supposed to look like,
Right.
which is a whole other
Yeah.
whole other
That's
piece.
a whole podcast in itself.
Yeah, I mean, but we put in things like warranty. We put in things like
Yep.
timing and how we're going to do it, releases. I wish I had my contract up. I'd go through it with you,
Well,
but
that's like for me, I've got in there what we call our platinum standard closing. So what
mhm,
that is we go ahead and these are the things that'll be taken care of for your closing. We're not able to close the project out unless we've got 5 punch out items or less left. So
mhm,
that came from one of the builders I used to work for. So that was the way
yeah,
they had it. I figured I actually like that part of what they did in their process, and we went ahead and included that in there. So it's like those little pieces like that. Those are the things that the homeowners understand. Oh,
yeah,
it's like, oh, great. Well, they're not going to, especially with the homeowner, they're putting a lot of money in. And this is someone where they live. Like, that's one
yeah,
of the big differences between residential and commercial. Commercial, this is a business that's supposed to make money in some way, shape, or form. While it's important, the structure's there and everything functions the way it's supposed to, they're less concerned in a lot of cases about how it actually looks. Homeowners are going to be concerned about how it looks because that's how they judge the project is what does this look like? Does it look right? So a
yeah,
huge difference. And it's why when you work in one, it's easy. Usually you'll find one of those areas it's easier to work in, or your teams are better able to function in.
personality.
Yeah. So
Really
that's
comes
literally
down to
what it comes to.
personality. I,
Yep.
I look at, construction is very, commercial construction is very black and white,
Right.
cut dry. It is or it isn't, right? Like
Hmm.
either you were there or you weren't there, right? And,
Right.
and it's very just blunt and straight to the point.
Mhm.
And dealing with residential and homeowners, it's all emotional based, right? Because it
Yep.
is it is their investment, it is their
Hmm.
personal living space, it's their life, it's their place where they
It's
raise
their
their kids.
oasis. It's their
Yeah,
castle.
and it's very emotionally tied.
Hmm.
So every decision has a profound effect upon them,
Yep.
and so you have to be able to understand that too. And everybody's going to realize what world they fit into better. And if you're like straight to the point, just zeroed in, it's either this or it's this or this. Commercial contracting is the way to go for you, right? Because it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to be, on a scale of perfect, right? We have, 0 to 10, and homeowners are going to want everything at an 8.5 or better, right?
At least,
And,
yes, agreed.
and commercial construction is there something there? They're going to hate. It's about
Right.
3 to 5, right?
Yeah.
That's if you
Does
get
it
above five,
actually open and close and do what it's supposed to? And all right, that's perfect. That's all I
yeah,
need.
yeah, move on. You
Yeah.
know,
Can I get this
um,
open? Can I start making money?
yeah, that's a lot of
It's
fun.
but it's that's what it comes down to. I mean, on the contract end of things, and like Nate's talked about before, and like I've already talked about too, one of the biggest pieces is you learn over time. Your contract is always going to be evolving. This isn't one of those pieces that literally every year we go back and review the contract and see
Mhm.
what new things get added. I mind map everything. So if you don't know what mind maps are, reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to let you know what that is. So, but we use that for everything on the organizational side of our company. And when I have a mind map that's open all the time, and when something happens, I put a note in there that this happened. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to add something new to the contract. It's a let's talk about this. Let's figure
Mhm.
out whether it makes sense, whether this happens on enough occasions for us to do something about it, or whether this was just a one-off. So, and I probably won't see it again for another 15 years if it ever happens again. And we do that. And that's, I would say, do that, keep that running piece like that. Take a look at
Yeah.
your contract every however often you want to review it to make changes. I don't, unless it's something dramatic, I typically don't make a change immediately. Probably the last change that I made immediately was with the photo and video one. So
Yeah.
whenever they wouldn't allow me to go ahead and take pictures of what was going on and post them. That was the first one. That's the one that I went, all right, well, I've got to do this now. So because of the fact that I had multiple contracts coming up and I'm like, I'm not going to get locked out of this somewhere else too.
Yeah, it's we do kind of the same thing. We do a review on our contract every
Mhm.
year just to make sure that it's staying up to date, making sure that we're
Right.
happy with it. We we put a new contract number at the bottom, just saying, hey, we've
Yeah.
refreshed it, we knew it, and copyright it, and kind of go
That,
from there.
that's the, so do that. And if you do nothing else, even if you review it and don't change it, change
Yeah,
that copyright date at the bottom or that review date at the bottom. Homeowners, if they get the contract and it's been 7 years since you've looked at it,
yeah,
so, or at least since it says it's been reviewed or updated, they, some people look poorly at
yeah.
that.
Well,
So have that.
that
It's just like your website. Have your website should always have the current year on it for whatever's going on.
it's funny that you say that because I had one of my project managers, I think it was last year, year before. He couldn't find our regular, and we use Google Drive as a
So you've got
storage
lots of
place.
you've got lots of past contracts. Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know what he was doing, but he had to get a contract signed, and he went in there and he thought he pulled out the current one, but it was the 2015 one. And it, and
Oh.
he pulled it all out, and he got it over there. He explained it all to the customer.
Right.
It was half the size of what it is today. And he was like,
Uh-huh.
oh, we're like, well, did you get the contract? Oh yeah, here you go. And he hands it in. And I was like, it's a little light. And he was like, "Oh no, it's all in there. It's all in there. They signed every page, everything's good." And I'm doing a review, and I said, "Well, good job on getting the contract. I applaud you on that, but this one's from 2015, and we're in the 2020s now. I think it was like 2022 or 2023, and it's like 8 years old, and it's like,
You're
anyways."
gonna have to go back and
Yeah,
get
I had to go. I
get
had
this
I
updated one revised or signed.
Well, the other part of it too was that I had to go back, right? Because I couldn't send him back and say like, "Look, I screwed up." I had to go
Right.
back, and I met with the customer, which they were a wonderful couple and completely understanding, and they
Yep.
understood the whole thing. I just said, "Unfortunately, this is the old contract, and we need to
Right.
get an updated contract, and we've added some things, and so so you
Which
guys
at
will
least
have
if you've
those
got
issues."
those if you've got those dates on there, that's the good thing is like if you've got to go back like they had to go back, it's real
Yeah,
obvious as the why. Oh, 2015, 2022. Got
yeah,
it. Okay.
yeah, exactly. So that kind of worked out.
No, and it's so I think I mean it's one of those things that it's a living, breathing document. There's no question about it. You're always gonna make changes to it. If you've got questions on it, definitely reach out to Nate or I. So
Yeah.
whether it's in the comments, so here, whether you hit us up on our social media pages, whatever the case may be. So reach out. We're here to help answer those things. I know I've
Well,
given
let me
my
give
contract out.
let
Whoop,
me
go
give a
ahead, Nate.
little caveat to that. Help me to reach out, help me to read it, help to guide through things. But I am not an attorney. I am not
Yes.
a lawyer. I do not
Yes.
represent you in different states. I would always advise you to go and seek counsel before you issue it because it is not.
Which, so
I'm not the end all be all. So I'll give you
so
back.
essentially what it is we tell you what we do. We don't tell you what you should do.
Exactly.
And
Thank you.
that's truly where the difference is this is what we do. This doesn't mean this will work for you. Even if you're in our state, it doesn't mean that it's the best thing for you. So you've got to have your own advice and counsel going ahead and saying, yes, this helps you in your situation. Definitely do it this way. So
And that is
I agree.
because I have read contracts before and legally I'm putting in my disclaimer early and often.
So, but it's hugely important, and that's what I want everyone to realize. So, as you want to have it, you think in the beginning you're doing yourselves a favor, you're being nice to your homeowners. And Nate and I have both learned throughout the years, unfortunately, that comes back and bites you in the butt, which is why the contract gets longer. Get that piece set up. So get it as quickly as you possibly can. You'll start adding things to it. Go to someone in your industry. Go to someone who's been doing this for a while and ask them, hey, so what are some of the key things that I have to have in right now? So type of thing. When people come to me and ask me, I literally like if it's another GC, I just hand them my contract. I'm like, just take it. I don't care one way or the other. So you can go
Yeah.
look at it. Use it again. Use it as a reference point. Don't
Yeah.
use that as the final word, but here's a reference point for you.
Yeah. Change it, use it. I've done it. I've given it
Yeah.
I've given it away to contractors and other people I
Yeah.
know. I say, hey, look, it's a template for you to get
Right.
started with, and you can read it, you can go through it, pull things out, take,
Mhm.
copy and paste it into your own stuff. I don't care. I'm not your
Right.
attorney.
Right.
I want people to have an understanding or a starting point for where they need to be and
Yeah.
try to make it easier for them. Cause I know where I started. I started with no contract. Everything
Mhm.
that I did for, probably the first couple of years, 2, 3 years was just a handshake deal. And at
Right.
that point in time, I was taking cash and, you know,
Right.
and it was just, and I was very lucky. I was very lucky that none of my people got hurt, that nobody screwed
Mhm.
up and ruined anything inside their house. Because all those things would have been liabilities on me.
Right.
And I didn't have a contract and I didn't have general liability insurance. Those are the
Mhm.
2 things I didn't have in the beginning.
Yep.
Going back, those are the 2 things that I ask every new contractor or every new person
Right.
coming in that's gonna do their own thing. Those are the 2 things that you need to get in place. A general liability, insurance for yourself in a startup business will run you about $100 a month, 150, because you just have a specific thing that you're doing and you're getting started.
And
It's not that expensive.
they base it off your revenue, and you don't have any
You
revenue
don't
right
have
now.
any.
Yeah, so it's easy.
Yeah, and you're covered, and you need to do that because insurance is another thing that we probably need to do a podcast on insurance. But insurance is another thing that you need to have, and I can't tell you how many people do not budget it into
Right.
their monthly expenses, and it's the
Mhm.
first thing that they lose when the money gets tight.
Right.
And it's like, no, no. That's the one thing that you keep on top of everything else because you walk onto their property, you walk onto anybody's property, you trip, you fall, you hurt, your
Yep.
people get hurt, materials damaged, you cut the wrong line, any
Mhm.
kind of catastrophe that happens, you want to be, covered for because if not, it could lead you to destitute.
Well, and the challenge with that, and one of the well, we don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but the challenge that people think about is like if you're a GC or something, you've got subcontractors. Like my subcontractors have insurance. Your subcontractors have insurance on what they do.
Hmm.
So if something happens, if your subcontractor does something like that Nate's
Yeah.
talking about, and there's damage done or a challenge, they're coming after the subcontractor. They're coming after you. So they're
Yeah.
going to name everybody in the process that they possibly
Everybody.
can, and you've got to be able to defend yourself and have the insurance because maybe your subcontractor's covered, but I'll bet you what, if they're covered and you're not, their attorney is going to whoop your attorney's butt. So
Hmm.
because the insurance company's coming with heavy hitters, so is what they're
Yeah.
coming when they come to play the game. So
Teams of
that's
teams of
yeah,
lawyers.
exactly. So that's what you got to always recognize. But yeah, the insurance is one of the huge things. I agree with you for sure on that. And that contract, just to go ahead and keep everything communicated effectively, setting
Yeah.
all the expectations the way it is, and protecting both of you. So is what it comes down to, you and the homeowner.
And the contract doesn't have to be anything elaborate, right? In the
No.
very beginning, you just have to get the basics in, and then
Yep.
you can grow off that. And the
Yep.
other part of it too is that, you can just have a handwritten contract if you wanted. If you
Hmm.
just write it out on a piece of notebook paper and everybody signs it,
Hmm.
they'll probably require that you stick your thumb and put your blood thumbprint on it. But hey, it all works.
It depends on what part of the United States you're in. So there's
Yeah,
definitely some parts that they would rather have that than your signature.
yeah, probably. So,
So
uh,
it's one of the key pieces, and that's one of the things that we don't want to see you get started in the industry without it, because I've heard too many horror stories where people get put out of the industry because they don't have it or because their insurance lapses. So that same way. These are some of the key pieces to have. And if you've been in the industry, go back and listen to some of the things that Nate and I talked about today. I'm sure there's some extra pieces you can go ahead and add in there that might make your contract just a little bit better for you and for your homeowners. And that's really what we're looking for, is to go ahead and take care of both sides in the construction industry. Make sure to go ahead and listen to this. Make sure to share this. So out to everybody you possibly can. That's the biggest thing you can do for us, is share this podcast out to your friends, people in the industry, anyone you know who wants to get in the industry, just to give them that little bit of experience and knowledge on what we do here at Builder Hacks. So let us know in the comments down below. So we look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. Until then, have an awesome day.